Thank you for joining us at the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston for today's online worship service. I'm D. Scott Cooper, Assistant Minister of Congregational Life. I'm joined this morning by our Senior Minister, the Reverend Dr. Colin Bosson, Carol Burris, our Director of Religious Community, Alma Vizcarra, our Membership and Communications Coordinator, Tawana Grice, our Business Administrator, and Mark Vogel, our Music Director, assisted by Charlie Burris. In today's sermon, I celebrate Mother's Day and continue our month's theme of perseverance. We've learned that we have viewers from literally all over the world now watching our videos. We would love to hear from you. Please drop us a line at ministers@firstuuhouston.org. Some of you may be new to our congregation or online services, so let me say a few words about Unitarian Universalism. We are a faith community that believes we do not need to think alike to love alike, and that how we live our lives is ultimately more important than what we profess to believe. We are a faith community that recognizes the importance of fellowship and cooperation, and advocates for an individual search for truth and meaning. We encourage and support spiritual growth within each one of us. Our Judeo-Christian roots have taught us the worth of each individual and the importance of justice and compassion. We respect other faith traditions because God is experienced in many ways. We appreciate the diversity of peoples because love is experienced in many ways. We honor the environment and all her creatures because our existence and experience are inescapably interconnected and interwoven. We are a faith community that welcomes you to our worship service this morning. We hope you find this time together a source of comfort and clarity. Thank you for joining us. I now invite you to hear our call to worship.
Better days. We gather our congregation through pixels and sound waves, images and sacred songs, waiting for better days. Better days. We offer you this service in observation of Mother's Day while we wait, and many of us hope, and many of us pray for better days. Better days. We send forth our sparks of connection with the intention that they stir within each person who hears our voices, the strength, the power, the compassion, the love we all need to reach better days. Better days. As we observe Mother's Day, standing or sitting, listening or watching, wherever each of us is, I invite you to make this day of waiting for better days, the best day you can make it. For the good earth, the mother of all, remains, rain still falls, the sun still shines, and this day of celebrating and waiting is the day we have been given. Let it be its own blessing, a bridge to the better days to come, a day when we might hear birdsong, or marvel at the complexity of a cloud, or the beauty of a photograph, or the comfort in a dear one's voice. And so let us, friends, waiting for better days, making the best of this day, observing Mother's Day, worship together.
Celebremos compartiendo nuestras vidas, encendiendo esta luz. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for this precious day, for this precious day.
Please join with me in the spirit that some call prayer and others name meditation. Make yourself comfortable. Relax. Take one deep breath and then another. Open your mind. Open your heart. O Spirit of life, that some of us name God and others call the spark that leaps from each to each, great, unnameable, mysterious source of all. We have arrived at Mother's Day, a day to honor, celebrate, and reflect on those women who gave us birth. Some of us come to this day with joy, with strong and tender feelings for the women who have earned the right to be called mother. For others, this day is not a time of celebration, but rather a time for reflection. We may feel absence through death or indifference. We may have complicated, difficult, unhappy associations with mother. No matter our feelings on this day, may we use this time to reflect on those who have mothered us, the women in our lives who have shown their love for us, whether through motherhood or mothering, those tough, gentle, truth-telling, loving, wise, whimsical women who have served as our mothers, our mentors, our guides, our friends. And on this Mothering Day, may we remember the great mother that sustains us, whose body is the very substance of our existence, the very ground upon which we walk, the very source of our being. We offer this prayer in the names of all of those known and unknown, present and absent, remembered and forgotten. We pray in the names of all of the helpers of humankind. May the congregation, absent in body, though present in spirit, say Amen. We pause now together to lift up that which sits heavy and light on our hearts. We lift up the families and friends of the more than 75,000 people in the United States and the close to 300,000 people worldwide who have lost their lives to COVID-19. We lift up all of those who are now struggling with the virus or any other form of health or ailment, those workers who are being forced back to work because politicians are ignoring the advice of healthcare professionals and reopening the economy, all of those families and individuals who are struggling with grave economic hardship, and the families and friends of Ahmaud Arbery, and all of those everywhere, especially people of color who have needlessly lost their lives to systematic racial hatred and violence. I invite you now to say the name or bring to mind those you wish to be held by this loving community and in its loving embrace. In this great cloud of witness and memory, amid this beloved community, we hear these names and hold them in our hearts. Let us remember the suffering and joy amid and among our community that we do not know. We pause in awe and wonder of the mystery that is life. And so, in the spirit of love, in the spirit of hope, and in the spirit of compassion, I invite each of you to enter into a time of silent prayer, meditation, or reflection.
In the quiet of this place, let this moment fill with grace. This is my prayer. This is my prayer. May the sense of mystery guide us through our journey. This is my prayer. This is my prayer. This is my prayer.
This morning's offering will go to support the Community Projects Team COVID-19 Relief Fund. This is a unique ad hoc fund suggested by the CPT because of the pandemic. The Museum District Community Projects Team identified several nonprofit organizations who are established to administer assistance programs and with whom we have long-standing relationships. As you might imagine, their resources are being stretched thin because of the crisis. The names of the 5 organizations will be listed at the end of the service. There are 3 groups that supply food and 2 that supply medical and dental services. These are organizations that have long been helping those in need, and we are attempting to expand services to meet an increased need during this pandemic. It is possible to address all of the needs currently in our communities, so we thank the Community Projects Team for identifying these 5 organizations who reflect our Unitarian Universalist values, and will stretch each dollar we donate to help those in need. We look to demonstrate the love of our faith community by our actions. And although we can't offer in-person service projects currently, we can give generously. The offering will now be greatly received.
A reading from a 2013 TED Talk called Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. Angela Lee Duckworth says this: "So I left the classroom and I went to graduate school to become a psychologist. I started studying kids and adults in all kinds of super challenging situations. And in every study, my question was, who is successful here and why? My research team and I went to West Point Military Academy. We tried to predict which cadets would stay in military training and which would drop out. We went to a national spelling bee and tried to predict which children would advance furthest in the competition. We studied rookie teachers working in really tough neighborhoods, asking which teachers were still going to be here teaching at the end of the school year, and of those, who will be the most effective at improving learning outcomes for their students. We partnered with private companies asking, which of the salespeople is going to keep their jobs? And who's going to earn the most money? And in all of those very different contexts, one characteristic emerged as a significant predictor of success. And it wasn't social intelligence, and it wasn't good looks or physical health, and it wasn't IQ. It was grit. Grit is passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. Grit is having stamina. Grit is sticking with your future day in and day out, not just for the week, not just for the month, but for years. Working really hard to make that future a reality. Grit is living life like it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Mother's Day Proclamation by Julia Ward Howe.
Proclamación del Día de la Madre, de Julia Ward Howe.
Arise, then, women of this day. Arise, all women who have hearts, whether your baptism be that of water or of tears.
Levántense, mujeres de hoy, levántense todas las que tienen corazón, ya sea que su bautismo haya sido con agua o con lágrimas.
Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause.
Digan firmemente, no aceptaremos que agencias irrelevantes decidan los asuntos importantes. Nuestros esposos no regresarán a nosotras apestando a matanzas en busca de caricias y aplausos.
Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience.
No nos arrebatarán a nuestros hijos para que desaprendan lo que hemos podido enseñarles sobre la caridad, la misericordia y la paciencia.
We, women of one country, will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own.
Nosotras, las mujeres de un país, tendremos demasiada compasión por las madres de otros países como para permitir que nuestros hijos se entrenen para herir a los suyos. Desde el seno de la tierra devastada, una voz se alza con la nuestra.
It says, disarm, disarm. The sword of the murder is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor does violence vindicate possession.
Esta dice, desármense, desármense. La espada del asesinato no es la balanza de la justicia. La sangre no borra la deshonra, ni la violencia vindica la posesión.
As men have often forsaken the plow and the anvil of the summons of war, let women now leave all that we may be left of home for a great and earnest day of council.
Así como los hombres han abandonado el arado y el yunque por el llamado a la guerra, dejen ahora que las mujeres abandonen todo lo que queda del hogar por un día grande y honrado de consejo.
Let them meet first as women to be well and commemorate the dead.
Dejen que ellas se reúnan primero como mujeres para lamentar y conmemorar a los fallecidos.
Let them then solemnly take counsel with each other as to the means whereby the great human family can live in peace, and each bearing after her own kind the sacred impress, not of Caesar, but of God.
Dejen entonces que solemnemente se aconsejen entre sí sobre los medios por los cuales la gran familia humana pueda vivir en paz, y que cada una demuestre a su propia gente la impresión sagrada, no la del César, sino la de Dios.
I know this rose will open. I know my rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will I know this rose will I know this rose will I know my fears will burn my soul I know its wings I know its wings I know its wings I know its wings I know this rose will
The 97-year-old man had just married the beautiful 23-year-old girl. After the wedding, he grabbed her hand and excitedly ran to the limousine to go off to the honeymoon. His best friend ran up to him and pulled him aside and said, "Good gracious gravy, Grover, aren't you afraid this is going to be fatal?" He thought for a minute and he said, "Well, if she dies, she dies." Like Grover, there are a lot of people these days who want to do what they want to do without concern for others. It never seems to enter their minds that they may be the ones who might be harmed or even die. Our theme for the month is perseverance. And the only way we're going to persevere through the pandemic is through our concern for one another. In his sermon 2 weeks ago, Reverend Colin addressed the problems inherent in individualism, and in his ministers' forum with Dr. Penn last week, he noted, "It is only by asking that question, what does my activity mean for others, that we will emerge or mitigate this crisis that we're in now." Perseverance and altruism, two attributes linked in my mind with mothers, which is lucky for me because it makes a good segue to noting that today is, in fact, Mother's Day. Now, I realize that not everyone watching this online is in Texas or even the United States. But for those countries who do celebrate Mother's Day, most do it today on the second Sunday in May. But it varies widely from the second Sunday of February in Norway to the 22nd of December in Indonesia. I'll let you in on a little secret. Ministers don't typically arm wrestle over who will get to preach the Mother's Day sermon. We save those contests for Easter and Christmas. This year, before the services went online, I was lining up a guest preacher who specifically did not want to preach on Mother's Day. Now, one would assume it's a candy-coated, breakfast-in-bed no-brainer, but it's fraught with landmines and emotional triggers galore. Because all mothers are not alike or ideal or even still around. For better or worse, the days of high school sweethearts marrying, white picket fences, and 2.3 children is less and less common. The assumed role and ideal attributes of a typical wife and mother have changed dramatically since when I was a child. Neither of my grandmothers worked outside the home, although they worked very hard inside the home and on the farm. My husband Conrad's mother worked as a well-regarded teacher and school counselor, but my mother rarely worked outside the home, perhaps one of the last generation where that was an option for most families. Because in the 80s, the profits and benefits from the rising productivity of the middle class was shifted from the actual workers to the owners and CEOs, and both parents began to have to work to keep up. That's a different sermon, but it must be mentioned to point to one of the reasons the roles of parents have changed since I was a kid. Now, both parents often work outside the home, and the main breadwinner is often not the man. Families do what it takes to get the bills paid. Currently, even in two-parent, opposite-gender parent households, the father knows best delineation of roles is less and less rigid. And just when we think we're figuring out a new paradigm, discovering what's in the cards, COVID-19 has played a game of 52 pickup with our family lives. Well, in fact, nearly every aspect of our lives. Parents are at home fulfilling the role of not only parent, but teacher, chef, and activities director. Perseverance has always been a necessary tool in a mother's toolbox, and never more so now than today. Donna Reed gave way to Shirley Partridge, a single parent who sang bubblegum pop songs while raising her 5 children. Today, single parents, by necessity, play the roles of both mother and father. In 1969, we were introduced to the world's most famous blended family, the Brady Bunch. I'm reminded of their theme song each time I'm on a Zoom call. According to the last census, 50% of the 60 million children under the age of 13 are currently living with one biological parent and that parent's current partner. And now, that step-parent may be the same gender as the parent, like me and Conrad's 2 kids. So, a sermon focused solely on a Hallmark-sponsored honoring of the June cleavers in our lives is no longer resonates with most folks, if it ever did, because not everyone was blessed with a loving and supportive mother. Not all who want to be mothers are able to be. So for some, it's a day that reminds them of what they missed out on. And this year, even more of us are aware of what we are missing out on. Those of us who gather every year with family to celebrate with our mothers, give them a hug and a potted plant, or take them out to lunch after church, find ourselves phoning or FaceTiming across the miles instead. Far more sad are those who have recently lost a mother, and those mothers who have lost children. The first holiday after a loved one dies is difficult, and my heart goes out to those who are looking at their first Mother's Day without their mom or without a child. Our very real mourning becomes more acute on this day. But now, allow me to take a historic detour to tell you about a woman who lost several children and became the inspiration for Mother's Day. Anne Reeves Jarvis was born in Virginia in 1832. Although she gave birth to nearly a dozen children, only 4 survived into adulthood. The others died of diseases such as the measles, typhoid fever, and diphtheria, common epidemics in Appalachia at the time. Her losses inspired her to take action and to help her community combat both childhood diseases and unsanitary conditions. While pregnant with her 6th child, Anne Jarvis began Mother's Day work clubs to improve health and sanitary conditions. She was part of a growing public health movement that provided assistance and education to families, raised money to buy medicine, and developed programs to inspect milk even before there were state requirements. Anne Jarvis had also been a peace activist who cared for wounded soldiers on both sides of the American Civil War. When typhoid fever and measles broke out in the military camps, Jarvis and her club members nursed the suffering soldiers from both sides at the request of a commander. The modern holiday of Mother's Day was first celebrated in 1908 when Anne Reeves Jarvis' daughter, Anna, held a memorial for her mother at St. Andrew's Methodist Church. Her campaign to make Mother's Day a recognized holiday in the United States began in 1905, the year her mother died. Anna Jarvis was reportedly inspired by her mother's work with Julia Ward Howe, the Unitarian social activist and poet who wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic. In 1870, Howe composed the Appeal to Womanhood Throughout the World, which later became known as the Mother's Day Proclamation. The appeal was tied to Howe's feminist conviction that women had a responsibility to shape their societies at the political level. In 1872, Howe asked for the celebration of a Mother's Day for Peace on the 2nd of June every year, but she was unsuccessful. The modern Mother's Day was established by Anna Jarvis 36 years later. In 1914, President Woodrow Wilson signed a congressional resolution officially making the second Sunday in May the National Mother's Day and calling for Americans to recognize it by displaying a flag. Anne Reeves Jarvis, the woman who inspired Mother's Day, began her activism by organizing to fight epidemics and disease in her part of the country. Julia Ward Howe firmly believed that women had a responsibility to shape their societies at the political level. And 150 years later, we can still find inspiration from them. According to a CNN article from this week, the spread of the coronavirus has brought the role of effective leadership into sharp focus. What people need now are leaders with empathy, compassion, and an ability to show support, skills that women leaders tend to exhibit more than men. The response of Germany, Taiwan, and Norway's women leadership have all proven effective, and New Zealand's Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has been widely praised for her clear, bold, and supportive approach to flattening the curve. The results of her clear communication, 20 deaths in a country of nearly 5 million people, speak for themselves. So we're back to the topic of attributes of women: empathy, compassion, and an ability to show support. And the two ideal attributes of mothers I mentioned earlier: perseverance and altruism. As I said earlier, our theme for the month is perseverance. Dictionary.com tells us that perseverance is a steady persistence in a course of action, a purpose or a state, especially in spite of difficulties, obstacles, or discouragement. One of the qualities of a great mother is indeed perseverance. From those first days of motherhood when a baby wants to be fed in the middle of the night, through the terrible 2s and 12s, right up through college, a good parent sticks with it when they are tired, frustrated, and angry, even while looking wistfully at the Facebook feeds of their single friends out at restaurants and nightclubs. A photo of my very young and very tired mother sitting on a stool bottle feeding me as an infant comes to mind. 2 decades later, when I would come home from college to earn money waiting tables on the night shift, she would sit up waiting, or at least not be able to fall asleep in her bed until she knew I was safely home. Several more decades later, she calls me whenever she and Dad hear that there's been a tornado anywhere in Texas, just to make sure I'm okay. Great parents have what Angela Lee Duckworth called grit, passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. Grit is having stamina. Grit is sticking with your future, and I might add that child's future, day in, day out, not just for the week, not just for the month, but for years, and working really hard to make that future a reality. Even though you may sometimes wonder what that miniature version of you may ever turn out to be, you keep with them, with the knowledge that your perseverance will hopefully pay off to produce a self-sufficient, productive adult. We need perseverance now. As Reverend Collins said in his midweek message emailed this week, the crisis we face will not disappear tomorrow or the next day. The virus will continue to remain a mortal threat until there is a vaccine. If we are going to get through this time as individuals, as a religious community, and as a society, we must persist in our struggles for justice and compassion. We may look wistfully at our Facebook feeds from a couple months ago, photos of us and our friends and family out at restaurants and nightclubs, but we're not going back there, at least not yet. Like wondering when that teenager will find work, church, and a nice set of friends, we wonder when we can return to work and to church and see our family and friends in person again. But we have to stay inside now to make that future a reality. And like parents have for each other, grandparents and friends to turn for support and advice, we too have each other to help us persevere through this difficult and discouraging time. My grandma Cooper had scotch taped to her kitchen cabinet a family circus comic that she had cut out of the newspaper. It was there for years, and both the newsprint and tape became yellow with age. The comic showed grandparents having pulled up in the driveway, getting out of the car to visit the 4 grandchildren. Looking through the window, the mother warns the kids, the first to ask, "What did you bring us?" goes to their room. As the saying goes, it was funny because it was true. My younger brother was notorious for greeting my grandparents with that question, "What did you bring us?" Another family circus comic I distinctly remember was the one showing the toddler, PJ, upset at having dropped his ice cream cone on the ground. His slightly older brother, Billy, assures him, "Don't worry, Mom will give you hers." Again, it was funny because it was true. I remember being annoyed that Mom would be cheated out of an ice cream when one of my younger siblings would drop theirs, and she would give them hers to soothe their feelings. Of course, I didn't feel bad enough to offer them mine instead, but I remember feeling sad that Mom missed out. This is the second attribute I associate with great mothers and want to lift up. Altruism is defined as the principle or practice of unselfish concern for or devotion to the welfare of others, as opposed to egotism. What attribute better describes a great parent than the willingness to put the welfare of their kids above their own? Like my story of Grover getting married, it strikes me that the unselfish concern for the welfare of others seems to be in short supply these days. From politicians withholding information about COVID-19 to give themselves time to buy and sell stocks, to a restaurant chain in Dallas telling workers to not wear masks, to those protesters claiming their rights are being denied because they are asked to shelter in place and forego concerts, haircuts, and trips to the mall, a consideration of the welfare of others seems to be less than an afterthought to many. We are called to do better than that. We are called to care for one another. If we can help protect others' lives by sheltering in place and wearing masks, we can do that. If we can give support to someone having a hard time, make it through this time, we can do that. We can call and check on one another. If we can support businesses by ordering online and doing curbside pickup, we can do that. Let's emulate that attribute of altruism and consider the welfare of others during this difficult time. All while washing our hands with soap while singing Blue Boat Home every few minutes. On this Mother's Day, think of the mothers with the best attributes and emulate them. Whether it's Donna Reed, Shirley Partridge, or your own mother. Because this difficult time, I'm afraid to say, won't be over soon. Which is why we need both altruism and perseverance. Even once a vaccine is found, it will be a while before things shake out and we are back to any semblance of what once was. I end with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In a sense, every day is Judgment Day, and we, through our deeds and words, our silence and speech, are constantly writing in the book of life. Light has come into the world, and every person must decide whether they will walk in the light of creative altruism or the darkness of destructive selfishness. This is the judgment. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Amen, and so be it.
Though I may speak with bravest fire and have the gift to all inspire, and have not love, my words are vain as sounding brass and hopeless gain. Though I may give all I possess, and striving so my love profess, but not be given by love within, the prophet soon turns strangely thin. Come, Spirit, come, our hearts control, our spirits long to be made whole. Let inward love guide every deed. By this we worship and are freed.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
During these challenging times and over the upcoming week, we look to embody attributes of the best mothers: empathy, compassion, and an ability to show support. And of course, perseverance and altruism. Because life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Go in peace, be well, and stay safe. While our church as buildings is closed, our church as people is still meeting, but now online. There are weekly and monthly offerings to keep you connected and engaged with our community. Reverend Scott is holding online office hours on Monday evening, and Reverend Colin will again hold his office hours on Wednesday afternoon. Two of our monthly groups are meeting on Thursday, the second Thursday discussion group at 6:30 and the First UU String Band at 7 p.m. Please go to our website, firstuuhouston.org/online-group-meetings for more details.